Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the Practical Voice Podcast. This episode of VUX World is brought to you by Speebly. What now? Speebly, you can interact through Speebly. You can interact with a website with your voice. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a little widget, little bit of code. You put it on a website and then you point Dialogflow to it and you can interact with whatever you've got in Dialogflow, which means that you can use an existing voice experience that you've created to interact with it from the front end of a website. Plus, you can even make some tweaks to that, or you can create something from scratch, and you'll be able to navigate through your website using your voice as well. So you can put little tags in there that if someone says, show me XYZ product, it can take you to that product page on the website. It's absolutely unbelievable. Speebly have got a deal now with for VUI designers and for creatives and developers in the voice space. You're all working with clients, you're all building voice experiences anyway. If you use Speebly to make your client's voice experience accessible on your client's website, so if your clients sign up to Speebly, then Speebly will give you a percentage of their revenue every month, which means that your client wins because they get to have voice enabled on their website, increase the engagement of their website, extend their Google action into their website. The user wins because they get to interact with a website with their voice and be taken through the website and navigate through the website with their voice as well, if you set it up like that. And you win because you get paid for the privilege. Everybody wins. Check it out. Speebly.com/VUX. SPEEBLY.com/VUX. On today's episode of VUX World, we are speaking to Jonathan Myers and Dave Grossman of Earplay. Earplay are literally at the top of their game. They're at the top of the industry as far as production value is concerned, as far as interactive storytelling is concerned, as far as interactive audio, full stop. Earplay are up there with the best in the world, and we're picking their brains today all about how they do what they do, how they create experiences that are so engaging, how they create something that has such high production value. You look at the likes of Jurassic World, Mr. Robot, you've got the Jack Ryan skill. Some of this stuff is absolutely, it's like Warner Brothers, Universal kind of like movie quality stuff. And we get into detail about how they do it all. Also, they've got a platform which you can design and build and publish voice experiences in. Now, it's not widely publicized and they're only in a really, really closed beta with a select few people at the moment. But the way John describes it is that it is the Google Docs of voice development and voice publishing. So we talk a little bit about the tools that they're using as well. Also, they've been working with Bose, and I don't even know how to describe this, but they've been working with Bose on interactive augmented reality audio. Get your head around that. Well, you don't have to because we explain all about it and we talk about it in the episode as well. We are also joined for the first time ever in life for this gaming special episode of VUX World by Florian Holland. Florian has been on the podcast before. He is at Jovo right now helping build out that framework and manage the projects that they have going on over at Jovo. And he's here. He's madly passionate about voice gaming. He's a voice game developer himself. So he's coming to guide the discussion and co-host with myself and Dustin to help steer the conversation around the gaming side of things. So this one is absolutely phenomenal. You are going to absolutely love it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jonathan Myers and Dave Grossman of Earplay on VUX World.
VUX World. VUX World. VUX World.
VUX World.
VUX World. Branding with the big faces.
I love listening to it.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims, the one and only.
Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims.
Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado,
Welcome to the show.
Dustin, we have quite an episode today, do we not?
We do. It's we have enough people for a basketball team right now. I don't know how good of a team we would be, but we've got 5 today, so it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of different perspectives today.
Well, I'm 5'7", so I won't be much use on the basketball court. But we also have another guest co-host with us for the first time, Dustin, ever.
Yeah, Florian, welcome.
Yeehaw! Thank you very much. This is super crazy, and I'm so excited. I can't tell you. It's like my first basketball match.
So Florian is at Jovo. He's been on the podcast before. He is a avid, madly passionate voice game developer. And Florian's here essentially to handle the gaming questions, because today's guests are absolutely phenomenal in the voice space. I mentioned in the intro who they are: Dave Grossman and Jonathan Myers from Earplay. I'll do the intros one at a time so that we're not talking over each other. But Jonathan, welcome to VUX World.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And Dave, welcome.
Thanks a lot.
So, how do we want to do this? Should we start with you, Jonathan, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce Earplay, and then we'll hear a little bit about Dave as well?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. I started out in sort of an odd place to get into games and then voice. I was into theater. I did playwriting and acting. That sort of led to a notion of like, well, how am I going to make a living and still be creative too? And games writing is what it came down to. So I worked for like Zynga and Disruptor Beam, the Facebook boom, that sort of a thing. But then when it came time to form a company or do something unique that was my own, I had the idea of doing an interactive radio drama, and that was sort of how Earplay was born. Earplay, is a company that enables you to play stories with your voice, and like I said, that started with Codename Cygnus back in 2013. We did a Kickstarter, and that became the world's first interactive radio drama where you play a role as a spy and can maneuver your way through the story. And shortly after we got rolling, Dave became a co-founder. And Dave has quite a pedigree in games, as you'll hear.
Extensive pedigree, I'm told. Dave, tell us a little bit about your background and about your experience and how you kind of found yourself in the voice world.
Well, I am a longtime purveyor of interactive story material of various types. I've been writing and designing and directing story games for going on 30 years now. I did a number of graphic adventures at LucasArts when that was a thing that people did at LucasArts back in the 90s. Secret of Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle are on my resume. I have made a fair number of children's games. If you're young, you may have grown up on Pajama Sam or something like that, written by me. I spent almost a decade directing design and writing at Telltale Games. May it rest in peace. And then for the last 5 years, I've been hooked up with John doing these crazy audio pieces at Earplay.
Cool. And we'll get into some of the stuff that you've been working on. And I mentioned again in the intro your likes of Jurassic World and recently working with Bose. There's the Jack Ryan experience. There's a whole host of stuff there. Florian, you're madly into voice games. Let's kick off by, if you had one burning question, if you had like the opportunity just to ask one priority question to Dave and Jonathan, what would it be?
See, I'm really torn on this one because there's, on the one hand, I'm super interested in super high-end quality professional interactive stories, the kind of that you have been producing, especially in collaboration with like Mr. Robot, Jurassic World, Jack Ryan, with already existing franchises. On the other hand, I'm thinking about what other voice developers out there that don't have like a big studio behind them, what they could learn from you and be kind of those people's voice here. So I think this would be my question. Since you have already been trying to establish your own franchise with Codename Cygnus, what were your learnings from that, and how do you go? Does that work in the Alexa world, like creating your own brand and your own franchise? What are your learnings in this regard?
I can kind of start that off, and then I'll sort of pass it on to Dave. I think that it started out as just trying to do something new and different. And we spent a lot of time prototyping and then developing our own backend system. And along the way, we like you were saying, we found sort of best practices along the way. And to us, it was always about interactive audio. It was never necessarily, it wasn't initially about voice, like the way that the voice industry has emerged, because this was before Alexa, right? And to us, Alexa became a channel outside of, starting on iOS. It became a channel where we could take the kind of things that we were doing and port it over and put it there. And it became, to me, like the perfect place where people could play the kind of things that we were experiencing. We saw that people liked what we were doing, but it was very niche up until then. And so when we started working, on Alexa, and we put the AirPlay skill there and we ported Codename Cygnus over, we already had a notion of sort of a development pipeline, an idea of what it meant to sort of A, design, and then B, script out, and then C, record that stuff, and then do the audio, and then upload it. So when we came to Alexa, we had to kind of face some initial limitations in terms of, file quality size, number of files in between prompts, and just sort of the way that the VUI worked was not the way that ours did. I mean, our speech recognition at the time was really crappy at the beginning. It's gotten a lot better over on the iOS side of things, but obviously, that was the key to Alexa's. They made, talking with a computer very smooth and it made it work very, very well. And so it just opened up things to us. And then again, my part in this was a little bit more product driven. Dave came on board and started working on the heavy duty stuff that you're talking about. And so I think Dave can speak a little bit more to how we worked. We began to work with IPs about, to figure out like, what did they want? What did they want to do? And how could we make something come alive?
Yeah, and it sounded like sort of the crux of that question was about what can you do if you are small scale and you're trying to do your own thing, and the biggest expense that we have on any of these things gets down to doing all of that audio recording and building the sound files and stuff for it. So if you're just somebody in your garage, you can get pretty far just by yourself, as long as you sort of manage the scope a little bit and don't go too crazy with actors. I think one of my favorite pieces of ours is something called Half a Glass, which was just done as a test for our system. And John said, "Oh, you got to make something that tries to break all the tools." And me being me, I couldn't just go off and write something that said, now say this to test this feature. I actually wrote a little story, and it was about sort of a recurring dream that you're having, and the sort of eternal question of, is the glass half empty or half full? And it repeats, and you sort of go through it a number of times and solve a couple of puzzles and finish it. So, you might interact with that thing for 20 minutes or so. But it was pretty easy to put together, and there's just a couple of actors in it. And it could have been done even without any actors at all. And then you can just get something like that together and put it out.
Oh, that's a great hint. So even if you're in your garage and you have nothing but your laptop microphone, this would already be better than having TTS voices and to get something semi-engaging starting.
Yeah, I will add that I did a scratch version of the audio for that, where it was just me sitting at my desk doing all the voices for it, and it was already pretty fun. I would have shown that to people.
So I wanted to also add too that I think that, the question you asked, is that better than speech to text, or I'm sorry, text to speech? I think it depends. I think for entertainment, especially, yes. Developing games and developing entertainment, people want to, enter a world. They want to be taken away and they want to have fun. And I think that people relate to human voices. It's much more emotional when it's a human voice. And it helps to paint that picture, in your head, which is, I think, what is very central to this form of entertainment as well. And so I think, that is key. Even if your capacity for making audio, isn't, like you don't have like a primo studio, you can, the tools are out there to kind of make your own audio without it sounding bad. And I encourage folks to do that, because I think it just, ups the quality bar a lot.
So do you see yourselves as audio producers then, or as game designers?
That is really interesting. Well, I think Dave, well, I'll speak for myself. I consider myself more of a designer, but now more than anything, a business person, product person. But I never really saw myself as an audio producer, but I had to learn it. And we've worked with some of, some top, audio folks. We do a lot of our projects by contracting out to the experts. Like I wouldn't consider myself the person that sits down and does all the mastering. I can do it because I've had to learn it along the way. But I think there is a certain even higher level where, if you work with professionals, that you can get that really super nice quality, leveling, mastering, that sort of thing. Dave, do you consider yourself a producer?
No, I'm a terrible producer of any type, and in no way am I an audio producer. I see myself as a writer and designer. These are my skills. It's where my focus lies. And when it comes to doing actual audio production, like audio is a medium that I'm working in, and I will rely on actual professionals to handle all the nuts and bolts there.
And I think there's more to it than just sort of. So when you say we're going to produce something that's interactive audio, there's a lot of little facets to it. Dave, again, design, writing, coaching of the aesthetics of the project and what the sort of the artistic goals are. A lot of times the role I've taken when we've done our own studio production is that I kind of sort of, I don't know, a project direct a little bit where, I do a lot of the voice direction, which I enjoy from my time during theater. I understand how that works, how to direct an actor. Sometimes we'll even go get, other directors, like when we're doing SAG productions, we'll work with a signatory and, a high quality production house in LA to make sure that goes right. But at the same time, when you're exporting the script, you have to prepare it and you have to coach those actors to do it in a particular way. And then those actors have to be really solid. And then you have to take those files and get those cut up. And then audio people kind of take over from there. And those audio people will then add sound effects. And maybe you have to find somebody to do composition or an underscore, things like that. So there's a ton of little facets. And, we've mastered, I think, the art of the interactive audio production pipeline. But I think that's also because, it's fairly new and there are not a lot of production houses out there that have taken this on. There are tons of audio production houses that I think could be really great at this. And, and I think this is, the industry is going to need that more. We've already started to kind of work with very particular partners on those sorts of things. But for example, Xandra, I think, has emerged as, a fellow studio. And in fact, we've started to do less a studio production result and focus more on the actual pipeline and production of our own tools. And so, there's a lot of folks out there that are starting to emerge that are just like incredibly, incredible at doing conversational design and especially like entertainment and games.
It seems to me like you're also experimenting a lot with the formats of your interactive stories, right? Now that I've been thinking about it, for example, the Mr. Robot skill is more of a skill that is very linear and has some kind of folk choices that quickly loop back into the main plot, whereas Jurassic World is more branched out. And Jack Ryan is again a different kind of skill with puzzles, but then Christmas Party is something where you can die and have to figure out how to get to the end of it. Is there? Do you have a kind of is it conscious decision of how much exploration versus exploitation you do? It seems like you're doing a lot of exploration and doing different kind of projects.
Well, we are. I mean, it's sort of the Wild West still in the world of voice gaming, and there are a lot of factors that you can monkey around with that depend on what the project is and what the goals are for it. You mentioned doing sort of open-ended stuff and exploration, and the Jack Ryan skill that we did last year was kind of an outlier for us in that it's much more open-ended in terms of what the users can do at any given time than our usual pieces. And there was a very specific reason for that, which is that it was supposed to feel like an escape room, and in an escape room you do a lot of exploration. You sort of wander around the room and you find things and you put together clues kind of on your own recognizance. So it's very unguided sort of experience. Usually we are working in a much more guided space, and the reason for that is so that we can ask narrower questions of the audience, and when it's their turn to make a decision, that that decision can be in a space that it is of a size that it is possible for the skill to deal with. And there's a thing that happens just with this kind of open-ended input in general, where if you ask an open-ended question like what do you want to do next, the number of things that a person can say in response to that is nearly infinite. But of course, the number of things that your skill will be able to respond to is extremely finite. And so that results in a lot of frustration with the space in between those things. So usually we try and narrow it down. And Jack Ryan was kind of a big experiment in how to handle it if we don't do that.
I'm glad we kind of got the chance to explain that, because I think that's where this conversation started out on Twitter, is when I'd tried to play with that Jack Ryan skill, and I was initially caught off guard because there's only a certain number of commands that you can use, isn't there? And you're kind of advised to note them down beforehand so that you can use them properly within the gaming experience. Can you kind of just expand a little bit more on your kind of thinking behind that? Because I must admit, I was kind of caught off guard a little bit with that, but then we kind of had a bit of a discussion, and you were kind of saying that it's kind of common practice for other games, and you were trying to create a gamer's game or a game for gamers. Can you kind of just expand a little bit about that kind of that aim?
Yeah. Actually, what I remember from Twitter was one of you guys tweeting something along those lines of, oh my goodness, look at this list of, there's like 9 or 10 different commands. That seems like a lot, and it wants me to write them all down. And in fact, we did recommend that people keep a pen and paper handy, but it wasn't for writing those commands down. It was actually just for keeping notes on all the sort of codes and puzzles that you were going to uncover while you were in the game. Because you only get 10 seconds to answer on Alexa, so you want to kind of have your responses ready. In fact, it's hard to remember 9 things to do, but we picked these specifically as a sort of parallel to the kinds of commands that you would find in, say, a graphic adventure of the point and click variety. So it's all the kind of basic stuff that you would want to do. Look at something, use a tool, open and close things, turn things on and off, and some of them come in pairs like that so that they're easier to remember. And once we got this in front of people, we discovered that getting them to remember those commands was not the problem at all. It was convincing them not to try other stuff. And this gets back to this thing of the English language is too descriptive and you can try too many things in it. And we had done a tutorial at the beginning that was designed to sort of try and get you to this idea of the kinds of things that were going to work in the game, and we just hadn't been heavy-handed enough about it, so we had to go back and kind of redo that and really hit you over the head with, like, these are the 10 things that are going to get you through this game, and you can try other stuff, but it isn't going to get you anywhere, and it'll just be frustrating. So just note about tutorial design. You be heavy-handed about that, people. You have to essentially design the space of success for people and make it a little bit clear to them at the outset to avoid frustration.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a principle that we try to hit most of the time, and we've been pretty, I think, successful about that. Which is, and it has a lot to do with why a lot of the skills that we've made are popular and people talk about them. There's this notion of the game design of the possibility space, and the possibility space is the sort of the area through which a person can interact or do things in order to have success or failure. And for voice UI games, a lot of that has to do with people's conception of what they can say and what they can't say. And I think that, in game design, just like with VUI design, if that possibility space is too wide open, right, people are going to have trouble understanding, and they're going to have to do a lot of just guessing at what they can or can't say. And I think a lot of skills can have that problem. I think there's also you can also bring it down and make it very, very specific. And sometimes that works really, really well, where it's like, hey, you've got 3 things you can do. And at this prompt, I'm going to say I'm going to make sure you understand those options. You can do A, B, or C. And I think that can be really, really good design. But sometimes like Dave was saying, we want to design something that's a little more open-ended and a little bit more complex so that people can explore. So I think keeping in mind that possibility space, always knowing, that something is out of bounds and something is in bounds, that is, one of the skills to sort of master as a UI, UX sort of designer.
You mentioned earlier that you found that you weren't heavy-handed enough with the opening tutorial. How do you go about discovering if things are or are not working in your games?
Well, we test them, and we test them on real people. We test them ourselves to begin with, but because we're sort of already biased and have too much knowledge about how the thing is supposed to work, sometimes the stuff won't come out until we actually go out with an external testing provider and get maybe 10 or 20 people who have never heard of this thing before to try it and see what they do, and if they're having success, then great. But if they're trying all kinds of crazy things, they're trying to tie their clothes and make ropes out of them and jump up in the air and jimmy doors and things that we haven't provided for, then we know we've got a little more work to do to define that space of possibility for them.
Yeah, and actually, Jack Ryan's interesting in that sense because, like Dave said, it was very different, except for maybe like half and except for Holiday Party. It's unusual in the sense that most of our skills are a fluid, forward-moving story, and everything is always about sort of the story, the dramatic interest, and what's going to happen next, and that's what kind of keeps people's attention and makes long-form, interactive audio work, I think. And with Jack Ryan, it was an attempt to sort of make it for, as you mentioned before, we wanted to make it for the gamers. And so, and that's a lot of our testing group. And so, most folks, they'll dig the story and all that. And we were trying new mechanics. So when we went to test, during the process, we were testing with gamers who are familiar with what in the old school days was called the SCUM system, right? And it's like 9 verbs. And you have an array of objects around you, and you can apply those verbs to the objects to solve the puzzles. And so a lot of our testers were just like, holy crap, this is awesome. I totally get this. They got their pen and paper and they're solving the problems and they're plowing through. And then we get to like what would be a really casual person who really isn't interested in games, but they like Jack Ryan or they want to go check out this little spy thing, and they're just confused. And I think that was kind of a lesson to us in terms of making sure that when we go and we test, that we're also getting a variety of folks that may not be interested. Now, I don't know if that would mean that we would have catered to the person who's not interested in games, because again, the assignment and what we were attempting to do was very specific. It's this was going to be a very difficult game that was supposed to be repeatable, and people who do play it sometimes have trouble getting to a certain point. They'll ask us questions. Dave has actually been role playing with a lot of them. Dave, you should tell them about this. You guys are going to get a kick out of this.
So we are a small studio, and that means that John and I wind up answering a lot of those support emails, and quite a few have come in for hints with Jack Ryan. The game has some built-in hints, but it's not always quite enough. And so we'll get interesting questions from them, and some of them are sort of repeat customers on that front. And there's one in particular where I started calling them by the code name, November, that the player gets in the in the skill, and I was going to be like, okay, now try this and good luck, November. And we sort of got into this back and forth. I've probably exchanged at least a dozen emails with this person, and even after they finished the skill, they've kept writing back and wanting to know, how are the other agents? How are they doing after our little adventure together? I miss them. I want to go on another thing with them. So it's really it's been cool to see that happening.
Yeah. And I think, that hits upon the thing that we're trying to do, which is, interactive audio storytelling it enables you to go into that space and like be a character and imagine yourself as that character. And across all the stuff, no matter how complex and branching or how like puzzly versus just super simple story with the choices and outcomes based on that, it's like the idea is to always hit that mark. And we've had some other, titles where that's happened, where people have responded and they say they want more. They kind of like say, oh, when's my next mission? When's the next assignment? When are we going to Isla Nublar again or something like that? And I think that when we see that, that's sort of an indicator that we've done something right.
Absolutely. And one of the trickiest things, you hear that quite a lot of voice skills and apps and actions don't tend to get past the first couple of turns, and they don't tend to have that much repeat usage either. Sounds as though you're kind of bucking the trend quite considerably here, and you've got a community of people who are really engaging with everything that you're creating. And you mentioned there around, not just the production value, but the story, keeping people engaged. Is that the primary thing that keeps people engaged and keeps people interacting and hanging around in the skill and engaging with it for longer? Or is there anything else in particular that you use to try and increase engagement?
Well, I think, yes, the story is kind of the main thing. That is our bread and butter. But there are aspects of story that you can use to sort of keep people around. I think reading the Harry Potter novels is a great a sort of study tool for that in terms of just how to create a page turner. Rowling is always sort of raising questions and then answering them, but before she answers them, she'll raise a new one, so that there's always something in your mind of like, oh, I really want to know about this. And that totally applies to really any kind of entertainment experience. You want to sort of build up and resolve tension and make sure that there's always some bit of something that the audience is anticipating before you are ready to end the experience.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think just story is very human and very central to our lives. And, really good storytelling, even within 30 seconds, will get somebody interested in wanting more. And I think, so the number one, we scrutinize that. We make sure that we want people that people want to be involved. I think, because it's an interactive medium though, as well, if you spend too much time in between choices, you could see some drop off from that. So because that's what people like. If otherwise, they're going to listen to an audiobook, listen to a podcast, which there are great versions of those that keep people engaged for hours as well. But I think that if they're coming to this and they're wanting to interact, then we try to examine and say, well, hey, maybe this is a little bit too long in between choices, or maybe we're not getting to the point quick enough to where they have an action, because I think they come to this to act, to do. And so, that's a big thing. And also, I don't want to discount audio too, because I think that's the real emotional power. Voice is like one of the most human form. Well, it is the most human form of communication, right? It is the center of that. And then audio, though, music, sound effects, hearing other voices as well is very emotionally powerful. And I think that right there is something that needs to be seized upon. So when you're you're designing and setting up these moments in between the choices, if you're using atmosphere, if you're using voices that have like different ranges and pitches and not just like flat voices, those things can make a huge difference as well on capturing the person's attention and wanting to do more. I think there's, for example, have you heard about this trend of ASMR? This idea that people just love to hear other voices. Should look that up. It's the soothing and comfortingness of a voice, and it creates sort of a hum or a buzz inside somebody else when they listen. It's a popular trend on YouTube, and I think that kind of captures some of what we're getting at with like interactive audio being very, very potent and powerful. It's just that too can be a factor to people wanting more, I guess.
I mean, this is syncs with another thing that I've noticed in many of your skills, maybe all of them. I think you also never use kind of an abstract narrator, but it's always the characters themselves that speak to the user, right? It's like that with Jurassic World, where the moderator of the podcast talks to you as your co-host, on Jack Ryan, where the operator talks to you. Also, a way to make it to get people into the action faster and deeper, right?
Well, actually, we have experimented with narrators before. In fact, our earplay demo, the official demo of our whole thing, uses a narrator, but it also uses actors for some of the parts. And when you use a narrator, you get into this kind of second person feel that it's sort of like a choose your own adventure novel, where it says, you are doing this and you are doing that. It sort of addresses you directly all the time. But it does seem like when we go first person and just have all of the characters in the story addressing you directly all the time, that makes for a little bit more of an immersive experience. It keeps you inside the fantasy a little better, a little more, and that's why we prefer to do things that way most of the time.
I'd like to piggyback on that too. I think part of the reason why it feels a little more immersive when there's not a narrator is if there's a narrator, it's kind of like they're in your head and they're dictating your thoughts to you a little bit. It's hard to get away from that. And when that happens, like if it's a male voice or a male sounding voice, then, how does that affect someone that, identifies differently, right? And I think that when you're allowed to fill your own thoughts up in your head completely, it can just help you go there a little bit more. Not to say that it's like that using a narrator is worse, as much as it just becomes something that you have to think about. And it becomes a notion of, well, is the narrator the player, or are they a conscience in their head? It's just you have to think about that, and you have to solve that problem and make it a part of the whole experience.
Now, of course, that said, the narrator makes certain things easier when you are doing something that is first person. You have all the characters in the room. One thing that is really awkward to do is to have the player character represented in that group of actors, because now two people will be speaking for that character, both the player and the actor. And that's just really, really dissonant. So we never do that. And it can be kind of awkward to write around that, where like, there's this one character you never hear and they only speak intermittently, and that's you and that's your character, can kind of stilt the experience. And when you are using a narrator, you kind of smooth over these moments a little bit by sort of describing for a little while the things that you're doing and then jumping back into a more first person style where you're interacting with the audience. So it really kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve and how you want to achieve it.
That's some very valuable insight. Thank you. I think that this also goes into another question that I had. But until about a week ago or so, if someone had asked me which role multimodality plays for earplay, I would have guessed that your answer would be not so high, because so far the skills I've seen don't use screens very much. Right? In Jurassic World, each chapter has one background screen, and in Jack Ryan, you see the commands written down that you can use, which is super helpful. I think I posted that on Twitter. But right now, since a week, we know that you take multimodality to a complete new level. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, we're voice first. We're definitely voice first. And even at our earliest stages, before Alexa came along, we had experimented a little bit with multimodality in the sense that, we were on iOS and we would pop your answers up so you could also tap them as well as hear them. Very similar to how chips work on Google Assistant, where, you can tap something rather than speak it. And we found that worked, but people really, they just like putting it in their pocket, let the iPhone in the pocket and just play through the buds. And, we even considered thinking about popping up maps. And I think the biggest mistake we made in those early days is when we ported to Android, we developed a script feature where we printed out on the screen the dialogue as it was occurring. And the thing was, what we heard actually is that people disliked, like it was almost like a stark contrast. People on iOS were like, "Oh my God, this is the greatest thing, so cool. It takes me there. I can imagine it." People on Android were like, "I don't know. I don't get this. I don't like it." And what was happening was that they were so drawn to being on the phone and looking that when they had something to look at, they just did it. There was no question about it. They just, they're scrolling text. I'm going to look at it. So they were reading just as much as they were listening, and they weren't going there. It was interrupting their ability to be like in that place, in that theater of the mind place. And so we took that very seriously when we learned that. And so when Alexa started developing multimodal, which I think is an amazing thing, like the show is great and there are tons of great purposes for it, I think we just need to be very careful about how we use that in order not to distract from people, to pull them out. And so for, each time we look at it, like, how are we going to do this? Mr. Robot was the first one, and we found a really interesting way because it starts out looking like what do you call it? A flash briefing. So it looks like a flash briefing. We get like a little flash briefing image. Nope. and then F Society pops up and we see that thing, but that's about it. I mean, we kind of left it at that, and then we moved on and did Jurassic World. And I think again, the moment where we're showing something is in between chapters. It's like, okay, we needed that. We needed to let people know, hey, here's a 15-minute segment, here's a 20-minute segment here, and they need to know, okay, now's time to take a break if you like, or something like that. We didn't just want it going fluid all the way, so we have the narrator, or what we call the meta narrator, pop up and say chapter 2, and that's the point at which we also pop up the image. Now, Jack Ryan became very different because suddenly, along the lines of what we were discussing earlier, there were ways to make use of that could be helpful. So if someone asks for help, and because they've, maybe they're like, oh, wait, what command can I use? If you ask for help, you actually can see all those words. So that becomes really, really helpful. In a way, it's like prevents people from going away. And in Jack Ryan, we also did the typical sort of slides of chapter this, chapter that. But it became sort of an aid or a helpful, a little more of a hint system. But again, it's not something that is required. And that's the critical thing, is that someone should just be able to close their eyes and enjoy something we're doing without seeing. So
it's also worth noting that the reading something and listening to voice are using the same part of your brain, so those are kind of interfering with each other, which is why when we do visuals, that reference list of commands aside, there's generally little or no text on them. They would treat them more as illustrations than anything else.
Dave, Jonathan, what are some of the tools that you're using? It sounds like you are building some tooling in-house as well. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and this kind of, is relevant to something that Florian had mentioned about Bose AR, which is something that just happened this past weekend. We've, for the past about year, have been working on opening up our tools. We had created all this stuff, again, starting back in 2013, an online system and an engine that runs voice user experiences. And that evolved into being a cross system where we deployed to Google Assistant, we deployed to Alexa, we still deploy to iOS. And but it was only something that we did for ourselves because we were setting out and saying, hey, we kind of have kick this new medium off, where does it go? And we were producing everything ourselves. But we got kind of burnt out in 2018. We were doing a lot. We produced over 80, or not, we didn't necessarily produce, but our system published over 80 hours of interactive audio content. And the latter half of that, or the sort of the end of 2018, was our first chance to say, we're going to let somebody else have our tools and see what they can do. And it was Capstone Publishing. They, were wanting to get a lot of content out onto free time. They had done one skill, and so they understood how it worked. And there was a really nice overlap between the way that their You Choose series books in print work and how we had done our You and the Beanstalk, which also was a part of the free time launch back last year. And so we got together and they said, well, we want to do 50 titles. And that's like 50 hours, right? And we're like, whoa, well, I mean, we're not going to be able to produce it that fast. We're not publishers in that sense, but they are, and they know audio production very, very well, and they know a publishing pipeline. And so we opened up our tools and said, well, what do you think of this? Not even knowing if it was going to work or not. And they're like, this is perfect. and sure enough, we got rolling. We made that content in 3.5 months, and it was out by the end of 2018. And so that really opened our eyes. And in the meanwhile, I think I'd mentioned before, Xandra, they were looking for a really, really good tool to use. And we got to talk and we showed them what we had, and they thought, wow, that's really cool. And so now, they're using our tools as well. And the most recent example of that is the Division Network skill that just came out, which Xandra was the conversational studio on, and it was built entirely with our platform. And we're going to see more and more of that. We're starting to bring on creators who are, I think, at the top of their game, VUI and VUX designers, conversational designers who want access. We're not doing it. You might even want to call it a private beta because we don't have a ton of documentation. It wasn't our original intent to just open up this way this quick. But what we're finding is that what we have can make this kind of content, our kind of content, interactive audio stories specifically, very, very fast and very efficiently. And it gives those designers the tools to do that. And sort of like things I'd said before, like the notion of a publishing pipeline and the audio and the recording and the uploading and all that is just sort of built into it because that's how we did it. And what we found is as we shifted, more and more opportunities have come up. Specifically about 6 months ago, we started talking with Bose, who was developing what is known as audio AR, and that means entirely non-visual AR. It's definitely a different modality because it's not through a home smart speaker, and it's not through necessarily your mobile device. It is through wearables. And if you can imagine, you can take these frames, like what they call the Bose frames. They're like glasses, sunglasses, and you pop them on, and it sounds like the world's filling up with sound. You know, most types of audio are centered around, okay, we're going to put a headset around you, and there's noise cancellation, and you can't hear anything else. You're just being completely surrounded by audio. The frames and the notion of audio AR is that there's a world around you, and you can still kind of hear it and understand that it's there, but we're filling up that space with audio, and it's become a great platform to work with. We partner with them, and you know, just this weekend at South by Southwest, we launched you know, our first story from that platform. It's called Head Games, and the way this works is that, you know, their AR is centered around mapping the world with sound, meaning that they have a map sort of API, and they can place audio in locations, and there's a magnometer. These frames are Bluetoothed into your phone, and they can know where you are and where you're looking and that sort of thing. And there's some really neat, you know, activity-based, like physical activity-based, you know, apps that are being built. Some other really interesting, you know, audio story type things that are being built. But what we're focused on is the idea that an earplay is a story you can play with your voice. Well, now it's a story that you can play with your voice and your head movement. So in addition to saying yes or saying no, you can nod your head yes or shake your head no. And it can only go from there. So we're now starting to take the notion of what is nonverbal communication and make that a part of the input that can move the story forward. So with Head Games, it's actually, I'll let Dave can talk about Head Games because he wrote it.
Well, I mean, it actually goes even a little further than you described, because we're having you sort of duck and turn around. There's a little bit more body movement in it than you would initially imagine from just the description, and it's just you know, it's just a kind of a fun extension to the experience. We can sort of get you more physically into the story, and that's great.
And what's even more interesting too is, you know, we're talking about how we're a tools platform now. Basically, we're a publishing system for creating and distributing interactive audio stories. Well, you know, with Bose, it's the same way. We have integrated in a way that if others want to publish our kind of interactive stories through the Earplay app or out onto iOS with voice and gesture, that's possible. And so we're actually very interested in hearing from developers that, or at least, you know, VUI designers that are wanting to work with a new platform and get onto a new channel, because, you know, if you adopt our tools, you can then put it out there.
Now, with these tools and with opening this up to other developers, does this mean Earplay is making the move to being a platform?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, I would say more specifically, you know, a publishing platform in the sense that we want to support people and we want, you know, others to be able to make things. But at the same time, we intend to be a bit curative at first or to cautiously step into this, because one of the things about, you know, one of the primary focuses of our brand has been the interactive audio medium and the high quality and the storytelling. And that's a distinctive, there's a very specific focus, and we don't want to let go of that. Right. And so that's why when we start partnering with folks, that has to be the focus as well. It's why, you know, Xandra, you know, became someone that we're working with. Why Capstone was like the first example. And we have a few more that will be announced in the near future. And it also has to do with the brands. Like, we're going to work with brands that are, you know, story focused, character focused properties that want to be a part of this sort of inner circle of people that are moving the medium forward. So we're not forgetting our mission in that sense, right? That we're here to nurture this new medium of interactive audio, but at the same time, you know, yes, we are becoming a platform so that other people can have a login, go in, make it from end to end, distribute to the different platform, to the different cross services that are out there.
So, is this top secret source, or is this something that you can share a little bit more about? Because I'd heard, I think it might have been on the Inside Voice podcast that I think you did, Jonathan, with James Poulter over at the Voice Alexa conference, I think it might have been. And also, I think I heard it on one of the VoiceBot podcast episodes where Zach from Zandra, who we're hopefully going to have on this podcast as well, actually, in the next few weeks, was talking about it was the tooling that interested him. One of the things that interested him, as well as the synergy between the two companies in terms of the skill sets that you have. Can you share a little bit more about specifically what these tools are? You've mentioned being able to control and manage the whole kind of pipeline, but if I was to sit down in front of it and to start using it to create a voice experience, what are some of the things that it will enable me to do? Or is that part of the secret sauce?
It is a little bit a part of the secret sauce. I'll go a little further, and I, sorry to be all top secret-y, but we've been doing this for about 6 years, and we do have some, like, what you would call trade secrets that we kind of only want to share with an inner circle at this stage. But I think the bottom line is that it is a real-time sort of web tool. Along the lines of, you've kind of seen things similar to this here and there out there that have been, in development for like a year or two, that sort of thing. Many people played with pull string and got to see that. But I think the best way to describe it, and this is going to, I think, hopefully send a sort of shockwave around the world, like, we're making the Google Docs of voice, is the best way to put it. You will be able to sit in a web browser and see somebody else making changes to something that can go live in just a click. It's pretty heavy duty. Again, I can't go into the specifics of how that works, but I hope that paints a picture of just sort of the level of the back end work that's been done. My CTO Bruno was a part of a company called Ware Incorporated. He was the branch manager in Croatia that built a lot of the back end technology. It was acquired by eBay, PayPal, and ultimately became the Boston branch of that became PayPal Boston, and that's how I got to know him. I'm based in Boston, and he, as a CTO, and a lot of engineers that we've been working with for 6 years, have developed over time, a really amazing tool set. Not necessarily just tool set, but also publishing system, and so it's all fully integrated. Even though it's modular and it can move and be deployed to different services, it is, to me, like just like the Maserati, so to speak, of voice tools. And I think that what helps too is that when Dave came along and we started making these tools better and thinking about what is our future with these, it's, even though it's like high-end technology, we've been a very creator focused company. So the creative aspect is sort of baked into how it all works. Like, with me as sort of a product manager at the center, and Dave is sort of the creative, officer, the person who wants to work with the creative people and needs that to move swiftly and easily. We've, had this sort of nice yin yang between Bruno building the technology and Dave, setting out the standards for what it needs to be like when the creator is working on it. And the thing that you often hear as a pitch is like, oh, it's code, you don't need to do any code. Well, that's true. And it's the same way with ours, but I think that it needs to be simple for the person who doesn't know the complexities, but it also needs to be able to be very complex. And so that people can use very deep logic and variables and things that, your average person, coming into using it for the first time may not even understand or get. You can make a Jack Ryan kind of thing with it, or you can make a simple quiz with it. And so about as far as we can go, we are interested in hearing from lots of creative people and devs, because we are always looking to understand what kind of projects people want to make. And we are learning from those people as we bring them in. We're just being a little slow about it because, we want to do it right.
Well, thank you for explaining that. That is really, really helpful. Before we wrap up, I just want to straighten a few things out with this Bose thing. I've understood this right. I just don't want to leave it without having it straight in my head. So the Bose wearables glasses, and you put them on, and then there's ambient sounds that doesn't completely cancel out the background noise, but they exist. The interactive stories and things are having people do different actions, and you can sense those actions through the wearables. But then you also mentioned that Bose have a mapping API that can place audio in various places. Is that like what, like you'll make the audio sound as though it's coming from inside a house if you're stood outside and stuff like that? Is it placing it in that respect?
I think, and you can go to the Bose website and there's like a Bose AR link that you can check out, and we can maybe put it into your podcast URL or something like that. But yeah, it can kind of do just about anything you want it to. It's kind of open for the designers now. I think what I mean by maps is if you're standing at a specific location on the world and you're using their creator tool, you can go and put a sound right on that spot so you can hear it as you're close to that spot. And if you walk away, it gets quieter, right? So really, truly mapping the world with sounds. It's fascinating stuff. And again, we're not, we're more into interactive audio storytelling, in a more imaginary sense, right? And so for us, it's not necessarily about geolocation, although we may play around and do some interesting stuff with that. For us, it's a little more isolated and fictional. They can happen any spot. So I'll give a little bit of a spoiler. The beginning, it's a sci-fi thriller, and the concept is that the moment that this experience starts, you've got these glasses on, you hear somebody speaking to you through mental telepathy. And the person says, "Don't talk. They can hear you. Nod your head if you can hear me." And you nod your head and it moves forward. And it goes from there. And so rather than, no matter where you are, whether you're inside or outside, the idea is that there's this sound that is somehow a part of the world around you. And we create some sounds of like little buzzy bee drones at one point, and it sounds like they're hovering around over your shoulder, and it creates this sort of like tingling, like hair standing on edge feeling, because it sounds like there's bees buzzing around you, but they're mechanical, and again, sorry, I don't want to spoil it. There's actually a full 10 to 15 minute version. You can download the AirPlay app. It's out right now, but you do have to have the Bose frames in order to get that experience. But I hope that helps. It's difficult to explain because it is entirely non-visual and an experiential moment. Like, it reminds me of the days when I was first doing this before Alexa. We would say, "Hey, want to try an interactive radio drama?" And people would be like, "What?" And I would have the hardest time describing the term interactive audio itself didn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense outside of like, oh, is this something that happens inside a console game or a computer game? And so when I would say, "Hey, here's interactive audio," and have like headset and a mobile device, people were like, what is this? Right. And I feel, and then once Alexa came along, it was suddenly like, oh, this is what interactive audio is. This is what it means to interact with audio. And I feel like it's something similar with this. It's so like forward thinking and so like such a wow moment when you first experience it that it's very difficult to describe. And I think we're all trying to understand what is the best and fastest way to get the point across. But yeah, Bose is really committed to I think they've committed to shipping at least 1 million units in 2019. And I'm very confident they're going to do it.
Oh, fascinating! Really, I'm still kind of captivated by Bose AR and what you can do to it. It sounds like a great solution, but I'm still wondering what the problem is that it solves. It sounds like it's about a public. That there's the issue with Alexa or Google Assistant that if you have to use your voice, it's not like very much suited to using it in public. But Bose AR seems to be kind of a solution to that, right? So you consume interactive stories while being on the road or in a train because you don't only use gestures. Is this also where you see the big opportunity here?
I think there's two sides. There's the voice industry, and then there's sort of what is this now new emerging audio AR industry, and that I think Bose is creating in the same way that Alexa, just powered forward and created voice. And I think, at this stage they are very distinct, meaning that Bose with Bose devices you can use Alexa and you can use Google, but that is separate from the audio AR. So right now, I believe we're one of maybe a couple experiences that are actually using voice, but that's because we have it in our app. The gestural communication and the movement of the devices is part of the AR platform. So they have sensors in those devices, and those sensors have a magnometer. They have a rotate. They can sense rotation. They can sense acceleration. There's an accelerometer, so it can know things about you. You can also, through the magnometer, understand like location. And it's about taking that data and using their SDK or Unity SDK to make an app more enhanced by the use of audio AR. And so voice isn't a natural part of that yet, except with AirPlay at this stage. I think that we'll see more of that happen, though. I think that the voice industry is very interested, and I think that voice naturally fits with audio AR, and that's what we're going to see. More to the question of like, how does this work on a sort of a daily basis? It is through iPhone right now, and then it'll soon be Android, and so you're Bluetoothing these devices, and so you're definitely mobile. And it works out well for us because we were iOS first, to be honest, before Alexa came along. So we already had, some client side work that we'd done with native iOS publishing or native iOS app development. And what we did is we have a screen that has control. So you can say stop when you're in the middle of the experience at a prompt for it to stop and go back to the library screen, or you can just tap it. There's the ability to tap stop and leave this experience. And when prompts pop up, there's also a visual element that just says, the different options and the different universal intents that you can perform in order to do that. So if you're moving through the world and you're out in public and you don't want to speak or you don't want to gesture, there is the option. You could just tap and listen. I think the ideal is that you're physically involved. But here's an example that I think I was using a little bit all weekend while I was there at South by Southwest to kind of describe think of how this could be really helpful in a very practical sense. Imagine that you put on these glasses and you walk into a museum, and by virtue of using that, an application that's on iOS that is connected to these glasses, when you walk over and you turn right and you go stand by painting, you look at it, what you hear is, oh, you're looking at the such and such Van Gogh. You're looking at Starry Night. Would you like to hear more? Right. And you can nod, or maybe, or if you're using our stuff, you could say yes. And that enables you to have an interaction that is kind of location aware and gesture aware. And the moment you turn away and walk elsewhere, it would know that. And it would know to maybe stop talking about the painting that you're no longer looking at. And imagine exploring a museum where that's possible everywhere. That is sort of the augmented audio reality, audio augmented reality, practically.
If you are looking for people who are in the creative space working on voice applications, and if any of those people who may well be amongst our listeners, if you want to kind of figure out whether there's any partnerships that can be made or anything that can happen there, what's the best way for someone to go about that?
Absolutely. So our website is a little outdated, and eventually it'll have more information on this. Right now, we seem very much like a studio still on the site, but you can email talent@earplay.com, TALENT at earplay.com.
Cool. And you're obviously you're both active on Twitter and things like that. Where can people find you on Twitter and online?
Yeah. So Twitter, it's like @earplay, and Facebook, it's pretty much earplay is the handle across all the systems. Dave, you want to tell people your handle?
My handle on Twitter is Phronopolis, which is PHRENOPOLIS.
Cool. Fantastic. John, Dave, Florian, Dustin, it's been absolutely unbelievable. Thanks so much. That's been absolutely intense.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks from my side as well. It's been a delight and pleasure. Absolutely.
That was John Myers, Dave Grossman, and our special guest co-host, Florian Holland. Thank you, chaps, for joining us. I'm just trying to put my brain back together. I think my brain was just blown apart in the last 15 minutes there. I think I should probably take those 15 minutes and put them towards the beginning, because that was absolutely mental. Augmented reality audio. Interactive augmented reality audio. That I can't get my head around it. It's absolutely unbelievable. Location-based, gesture-based. It sounds absolutely mental. I would strongly advise for you to go and check out this Bose case study with EarPlay, because it is, I have no words. And then also to hear about their platform, the Google Docs of voice development, the Google Docs of publishing for voice. It sounds absolutely unbelievable. If you are interested in taking a look at it, and it sounds as though John is, pre-qualifying the high-end experiential designers to look at this kind of closed beta platform. If you think you've got the chops, reach out to them, get in touch, because it sounds like it could change the way certainly interactive stories and the more creative side of voice is created. But also he was also mentioning that actually it's not just for the creative and interactive story stuff. You can build anything on there, so it could well be filling a gap that has been left by Pullstring after the acquisition of Apple, and who knows, taking it even further. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We obviously got into some immense detail on story design and interactive story design and engagement and production value and the little nuances of creating this stuff, as well as the audio production pipeline. Immense knowledge. We were saying at the end there that we've left bags on the table, and we should probably do another one and follow up on all this stuff, because yeah, it was just absolutely immense. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Florian, and thank you, Dustin. And as always, boys and girls, thank you for listening. Until next time, see you later.